This is Laserlight Presents All About the Gig. All right, today in the studio I have Dave Sorelli and Devin Kruger. How you guys doing?
Doing good, man.
Doing very well.
Good to hear, good to hear. Today's topic, we're going to talk about gig prep, actually. And I had a couple questions, and I'll just give you guys some of the themes and let you tell us a little bit about how you guys go about each of these stages and steps. So, prep, when a venue calls you, contacts you, let's say it's a venue that is an unknown, it's a first-timer. What's the first thing that you ask or inquire about? Dave, you can go ahead.
The first thing I'm going to do is figure out what kind of music they're expecting, right? So if they're more of a restaurant, maybe they want a dinner band, we're going to be a little bit more of a background band. And that's going to greatly influence who I need to hire, what I need to bring, which brings me to my second question for them is, what exactly are you expecting out of this group? Because if you're hiring a jazz trio, that's going to be much different than a, solo acoustic or a duo acoustic. And I want to kind of see what they're expecting out of that. And then, of course, discussing some of the more prickly topics of what's pay, are we getting a check, cash, that kind of thing, just to kind of see what I'm going into and what I can tell my team how I'm paying them and what's going to happen at the end of the night.
Are you going to get fed? Are you going to get drinks?
Mm-hmm.
That thing too?
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Well, that's the first thing I would have asked.
Right? Oh, yeah. Do I get a free
what do
meal?
you guys, could you send me the menu?
Yeah.
Excellent. How about you, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same things. The tricky one is if it's a truly unknown, that's always a trick because there's very few times where I'm being offered a gig, even if I'm cold calling, where I'm being offered a gig or I'm getting a gig at a place that I've never heard of, never seen. So if it's a truly unknown, I've probably first, I've looked them up on Yelp and Facebook or video. I'm trying to see if I can get pictures of the place because I want to ask as few questions as possible. You want to kind of not quite fake it till you make it, but you want to seem like you're on top of it.
Yeah.
So hopefully I've known some people who've played there. I can ask a question like, what's the vibe like? What's it like? Most of the time when I'm talking to someone about booking, before a venue's even brought up, normally they know what kind of band they're hiring. But if they don't, and they just were expecting music, at that point, then I'm like, okay, what's your crowd like? Is this like top 40, dinner crowd? Am I playing like, are you expecting entertainment or do you want background music? And I'm trying to figure those things out.
Sure.
And from there, and often pay tells me how many people I can bring as well. It's not normally of how big is your stage or something like that. Normally I can judge how many people I can bring by what they're going to offer. And from there, I know we've said it off script before about I just bring everything. I pack the car to its gills, and then I'll walk in with my guitar on my shoulder and a backpack and just kind of scope the place out, say hi to the manager, and then I'll kind of look at the crowd and look at it and then decide how much stuff I'm going to get out of my car because I'd rather be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Is there ever a time where you would head there ahead of time and maybe check out the place, maybe go see if
I was trying to book. So there's plenty of owners and venue managers who are troublesome at best to get a hold of. So a lot of times your best bet is to actually just drive there. Hopefully it's nearby enough and you can make a reason to go there in person, buy a beer, talk to the person and kind of do that really person-to-person kind of interaction and get some answers out of them if, they're not answering the usual messages, email, Facebook, all the other things that people use nowadays, of course. That answer the question?
Oh, sure. No, absolutely.
I was losing my train of thought.
As far as pairing, with other artists, we've talked about this before too. So now you've got an idea of what their expectation is. Is it ambient sound? Is it entertainment? Or is it an eyes forward, or are people going to be talking and you're going to be playing over and under them type thing? But trio, duo, you guys obviously have a pretty stacked bag of artists to call upon, and now how would you go about formulating that? You probably have genre specific artists that you would want to sync up with, based on a certain theme.
I have a good amount of people that can kind of double dip into any sort of genre. They really aren't like pigeonholed into like just jazz or just rock or anything like that. Especially in the Midwest, it's kind of an unspoken rule that if you're a pro musician, you got to do a little bit of everything to survive if you want to eat. So a lot of the guys I would be very comfortable calling for the same jazz gig as I would for a rock gig. And it would just be more of a conversation of like, hey, they're looking for more of this like 70s R&B thing. So here's the songs we're going to go with. Versus like, okay, we're a background band and we're going to do Great American Songbook standards and just, play dinner music the whole night.
Yeah.
And I would add to that and say that the only time I'm worried about a player being genre specific is if I'm already down my list of subs pretty far. If I can't call my top picks, then I might start thinking about it a little bit and say, oh, well, so-and-so really excels at this or this. And then I may pick someone more dependent on the gig. But yeah, what Dave said, in terms of like my usual players and people I get to play with often, I feel good calling them for anything really.
You mentioned pay, talking about, are we getting paid
The
up
dreaded
front?
topic.
Yeah. Well, it is, but I think it's something that, the more you can shed a light on, the better for people who are struggling with the same thing, or maybe are, just beginning.
Yeah.
And, what's the etiquette? Like you were saying, you want to kind of keep a cavalier, throw it away attitude so you sound, accomplished and, they made the right pick by calling you type thing. But at the same time, if it was a new gig, a new place for the first time, would you ask money up front?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You have to. You got to. You need to be as politely assertive as possible, right? So you can't let them walk over you. You gotta at least have in your mind a ballpark of what your group is going to be worth that night. So if you're bringing a 5-piece out and you're playing from 9 to midnight at a fairly popular bar in whatever area you're at, you need to think, okay, there is a price amount that we won't go below. Because all of a sudden, if you start taking lower and lower gigs, that's how you drive the market down. And this has come back to the age-old conundrum of the $100 gig. And that's been around since the 70s, of this idea that every musician makes $100 a night. But the problem is, in 2020, that still really hasn't changed. We need to make sure we work together as musicians to not allow our craft to be devalued. So you do need to go in with a price point in mind. And you need to be polite about it. And if they can't match it, then you need to politely maybe suggest that they rethink how they're doing their entertainment without sounding too asinine, right?
Yeah.
That's the trick of like, oh, maybe you can't afford a 5-piece. I have this awesome trio. For that price point, I can bring this trio. Or even more so, oh, you can't really afford the trio. I have this great duo I can bring for that price
Give
point.
them options, right?
Give them some options.
And that tends to be the route I go as well. Very rarely have I ever really turned down a gig. What it often ends up becoming is being like, well, these guys are worth more than that, and I want to make sure that that is firmly established. Because, like Dave was saying, if you drive down the market, not only is it not good for you, it's not good for the entire scene. And, I've heard plenty of stories from the old guard complaining about like young guys coming in, going under the radar and accepting way less. And all of a sudden those guys don't get booked anymore. And then the whole industry sinks down a couple $100 for the night. And it's not good for everyone. Because if those guys would have stuck it out for another couple of years, they also would have been making the bigger paycheck. So it's a tricky thing. And kind of going along with saying it up front, like Dave was saying, that's definitely a skill just that everyone has to learn, is to be confident and talk about the money right up front. And like for a lot of guys, I know it's not comfortable, but that's like part of the gig. If you're going to be a guy who books for your band and your friends and make sure that everyone's getting their fair share, then you have to be comfortable just to bring up those topics and bridge it as best as and politely as you can. But
yeah, and you can also kind of offset that like awkwardness by it not just coming out with a price right off the gate. ease into it, just like you're selling anything. You are selling yourself, you're selling your brand in your band. So you say, hey, I'm bringing this sound equipment, I'm bringing these musicians, I'm going to give you this entertainment this night, and we've also provided this kind of entertainment to great success here, 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 and here. This is my price for what you're getting. So you're telling them up front, like, okay, here is this big list of what you're getting, so you're not going in dark with a price.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that it's good to exemplify in the conversation early on as a segue to price. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you reaching out. Oh, really? How'd you hear about? Oh, excellent. Yeah, oh yeah, that's this, that, and the other. And then, so this is kind of what I have to offer as far as varieties and different,
Yeah.
And then that way now before they can rebut or even, now you're letting them know where your price points are, That's great. That's a good way to.
I know we're also coming in it from the point of view that we know that if we play at this place for a while, that I'm counting on us being good enough that I can ask for a raise later on too. So I'm also willing to play for a place, even if they're like barely scraping by my minimum number. But I know that they have the money to do more. It's just that you have to become established with them. So if they're a new venue I've never played at, they have no idea who I am. My name means nothing to them. I'm comfortable with the fact that, the first couple gigs, especially the first gig, I'm like, look, can you at least pay all my guys $100 a day? I know that sucks, but like, can we at least get that? I want you to hear us, and then we can negotiate it from there. Like, bring us in for that.
Yeah.
Hear us. I think you'll be happy.
And that's fair.
And then we can negotiate again. But like, we'll come in the door for that.
And you're building a relationship right
Exactly.
away. It's some rapport building, So do you get the check before you start to play? Cash or check?
Rarely.
Rarely, yeah.
Is that
I'm never
absurd to even ask for?
It's not absurd. It comes down to a trust thing. Most places, they will pay you afterwards. Kind of think of the dinner conundrum, right? You don't pay for your meal before you eat it, sort of thing. So I never really am concerned about that. Typically at that point in time, there is a paper trail to be like, hey, you said you were going to pay me this. Look at this email. And that kind of stuff does hold up in court if it ever went that far. Let's hope it never does.
I understand. Yeah, you guys had some burn stories that you told me about too.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've luckily
had,
never had it happen personally to me. But I do have some colleagues that have been stiffed at the end of the night, and the musicians have come together to make sure to not frequent that venue. Yeah. And as far as I know, they might have even closed. Yeah. I'm not sure, but without naming names.
Yeah. The other thing too is
serves them right,
It depends on the pay grade too. All this stuff changes depending on what market you're playing in. When I've played in like big wedding groups of like 9-piece bands, and like they're paying thousands of dollars for a band to play. That stuff was in the bank, ready to go weeks before we showed up. We don't get paid until the gig's over, but nonetheless, like they paid us. Like they're done. But by the time I get down to like a solo gig and someone's handing me a couple $100, at that point they're not going to give it to me before the end of the night because they're like, oh, we're literally waiting for drink sales and we're just going to give it to you out of the register. I've had that plenty of times where they're waiting to hit a threshold and then they pull it out of the register and just count it there for you.
And some bars even, they boost your pay depending on how many drink sales you give them.
That too.
So, if you do a really great bar night for them and they clear thousands and thousands of dollars behind the bar, all of a sudden they're going to slip you another couple $100 because, hey, you guys did awesome. We want you back. We're going to take care of you to make sure we have another night like this because you drew so many people here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had this experience as well, Dave. The bars in town for like little gigs here and there on a Monday through Thursday that would pay me ahead of time before we were done, like say during a set break or something like that. They were normally places that we had pretty standard residencies with. We played at regularly. We knew the bar staff, and they would just do it to be nice. They would come during our second break and be like, hey, just paying you out, just so that way at the end of the night you don't have to come up and find me. And they were just being nice about it at that point because we had a rapport.
Well, that's good.
But it wasn't like a set in stone thing. Mm-hmm. If they didn't give it to me then, I wasn't going to be upset. I'm like, I'll get it at the end of the night. Yeah. It just became a nice little like chunk on top to be like, oh, great, I can just pay everyone now. And then as soon as the drummer's packed up, he can just leave. Yeah. He's not going to be sitting around getting a beer, waiting for 45 minutes.
That is cool.
BSing, pretending to do stuff where he's really just waiting to get paid.
Right. No, I understand. I've been there too. Yeah. Let's circle back to what you were saying, Devin, about covering all your bases. I usually just pack everything. Equipment. So obviously you're going to bring your instruments. You're going to bring some amplification. Are you just using a mixing board? Are you putting everything into a mixer? That's the standard, right? You bring your own little mixer.
Everybody uses a different one.
Mics,
So one of the popular cover bands I play with in the area, we still have an analog board that we bring around, and that's cool. It's great. You got physical faders you can manipulate. A lot of people, which I know Devin has, have moved to the digital mixers, which are awesome as well. But yeah, you gotta have something to kind of control your own sound at least.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, even though I do bring a mixer, I have to have a pretty large band or a large venue till I actually start putting many things through it. A lot of gigs, I might only put vocals through it.
Yeah, I was going to say, sure.
I trust that everyone else to mix to the room. I trust them to be like, well, as loud as you are, that's as loud as they'll hear you. They're not getting anything more out of us than that. So it's just our vocals. If it's outside, kick drum, because the kick will get lost in the dead air.
Bass a lot too.
Bass too. But yeah, I don't start putting guitar or things like that into a mixer until it's a pretty big band or a pretty big crowd, like 150, 200 up.
Mm-hmm.
Sound checks. So now you're there. You've got your equipment dialed in. You're going on in 20 minutes or something like that, right? So general practices, Dave? Sound check? What does that mean? What does it not mean?
It depends again with the band I'm playing with. So if it's a restaurant that we've played at 100 times, I'm going to trust my guys. They know how to dial in their sound. I'm going to make sure that, guitar player doesn't turn up too loud. Just kind of tell them, hey, let's try and keep it around this threshold. Same for myself. Let the drummer know, like, hey, pull your punches a little bit. We got to keep it a little bit reined in for the first few sets. Now you step up to a bigger bar. That's more of a Saturday, Friday night vibe where you got dancing and stuff. Now you have your mains up. Typically, you'll have the band kind of like play something and maybe have your front man stand out front and say, hey, this could come up, this could come down. If your guitar player has a long cord or a wireless system, they'll go out front and check. And the only other step up from that is when you have an actual sound guy. And then they'll be calling the shots from there.
How about you, Devin?
Yeah,
How's
agreed.
the sound check usually go for you?
With smaller groups, say like quartets, trios, things like that, a lot of times there is no true sound check. What often ends up happening is I have a lot of presets I'm pretty happy with already for vocals, because like I said, that's normally the only thing running through it. Mm-hmm. So I'm trusting that we will be careful about our stage volume, because that's the volume being pumped out. So that is the sound check. How loud are we on stage? And then for vocals, the thing I do is I really try and use the mic to its ability. So if I know the mic is this loud out front, I know how loud it is coming from my monitor at my feet, that means I'll start singing 6 inches away from it. And I'll judge that if it sounds loud coming at my face, it sounds loud out there. So I'm just like with my instrument where I'm trying to balance that with the band, I'm now balancing my voice with the band as well. And I'm trusting that that's mixing well out front. And that's just from experience with that kind of group. When it comes to bigger bands, my trick is, because I'm often the guy also mixing, is I try and throw a song to another singer at the beginning, if I'm lucky enough to have a singer. And I am often enough lucky to have another singer in the band. So I give them the first song to sing. And then if I don't have to play guitar, if it's a big enough group, I literally just take my iPad out and I'll do a quick check on the band. Often more important than the out mix is actually the monitor mix for everyone. That's actually the part that I have to do more work on, is singers saying I can't hear myself, horn players saying I can't hear myself, drummers saying I need keys, I need guitar. So I'll do that. And then
No, wait. Through the monitors.
Through the monitors.
And how are you controlling those? You mentioned an iPad. Did you have some sort of a software?
So I have a digital mixer. So the only way I can control it is with an iPad. So and I have 6 auxiliary sends. So I can have 6 independent monitor mixes and the main mix. So I go through and I'll adjust monitors for anyone. And that ends up being normally the thing that needs done the most. And if I do have to play guitar on the song, when I go out front, I just make mental notes. So I'll walk out there with a really long chord, hear how we sound. I'll step back, make a couple little adjustments.
There we go. That's
step
what I
out
was
again if I need
at.
to.
Yeah.
But I just do it with the iPad if I don't need to play guitar. If I need to play guitar, I just walk out there. The other guy's singing. I can hear how that mixes in. If he sounds a little hot, I'll bring his and my mic down depending on how I think he sings. If I think he's a hotter singer than me, then maybe I'll just bring him down. If I think we sing at similar volumes, then I'll bring both of our volumes down and assume that they're going to be similar.
Yeah.
And I'll do all that stuff out front, and then I'll pull back. Still ask everyone about monitor mixes, do a little bit of that. And I know for like my wedding gigs, I do a trick where we end almost every first set with At Last. And I do it purely because by then the band's excited and they've gotten playing again, and I go double check the sound again because I don't have to play on At Last. So for like the wedding band, I'm like, keyboard player, you
Yeah.
got this. And I set my guitar down again. And that's normally the last time I check the sound.
Yeah.
And I assume the rest of the night will be fine unless there's glaring issues.
Sure, that's really cool. Dave, how often do you find, percentage-wise, that you're going somewhere that has its own PA system?
70-30. 70% not, 30% does.
Oh, not. Okay.
Yeah.
How often know that 30% are you
Interesting.
using it?
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah. So that's, they'll rope you in by saying, hey, yeah, we got sound. And you get there and their cables look like they've been through a washing machine and then
good
some.
God.
Half the channels don't work on the board.
Yep. The faders look like they've been through,
So right back to the bring
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
They're
Yeah.
sitting there putting their cigarettes out on the
Yeah,
board.
basically. It looks like they've had a kickball tournament with the
Exactly.
monitors. It's ridiculous. The microphones look like they've played softball with them.
If someone tells me they have a PA system, I still have a PA in my
Yeah.
car.
Now, on the chance that it's
Yeah.
actually solid, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. We love that. And then all of a sudden, maybe we don't have to pull over stuff out of the car. That's great. But I always assume that it is not going to be up to the standard that we would like.
Right.
So, yeah, I would say, 70-30. And in that 30%, maybe 15% is a usable
It's actually a-
system.
right.
Yeah. But, yeah, we always plan to have our own sound. Just in case, because you never know what you're going to run into there.
And the timelines, right? So is it always an atypical 3-hour? I mean,
No.
Is it understood that breaks are,
That
I
does
think
seem to
you
be
guys have-
understood. The only time I've ever heard of people not getting breaks are like friends who I know who play in Nashville, and they do a 3-hour set straight, no breaks every night.
Nice.
But that's because they're also playing for the crowd. They make all their money off of what the crowd puts in that bucket. So I bet the venue doesn't care if they take a break, but they're not gonna.
Yeah.
Uh, That's 3 breaks is 45 minutes. They're not on stage having
That's
people
how
put
I've
money in a
always
bucket.
thought too. Right.
But-
what will you guys do in a atypical scenario? 2 breaks, 10 minutes? I mean, what do
Yeah, if you get a
usually-
3-hour set, so typically we do hour out front, take a 15, 45, take a 15, 45, done. So that's our 3-hour time slot plan. I've also played gigs where, like Put in Bay, for example, a lot of the bars out there want you to do hour sets. So you play an hour, take half-hour break. Play an hour, take a half-hour
Wow,
break.
half an
play
hour.
Yeah. It's different out there. It's a little bit different.
Because
as
they
far
want to
as-
revert. I think you've said something before, because they want to blend back in the jukebox.
Yeah, a little bit of that sort
Yeah.
of thing too. So people have a little bit of a break from the live music. They can, do
And those
whatever
aren't
they're
hard
doing.
rules either. Like, we are cognizant of the audience and what they want. If an audience is digging the music and they seem like they're really losing interest during breaks, especially if that audience is tipping or good for the bar or any of the above, there's been plenty of times where I've been like, they're really digging this, and every time we take a break, it's going to be a buzzkill. And if
Yeah.
we take too long of a break, they might leave.
Well,
So what ends up
exactly.
happening is I'll be like, let's play an hour 15 till
It's deflating.
and
or
then
can be.
we'll take like 1 20-minute break and we'll marathon it out tonight. And I don't make a plan out of doing that all the time, but the whole like taking 15s, that's stage 1. But if it's not working, then I'll change it up on the fly and we'll just run for it. Because in the end, I'm just trying to make the crowd happy. But the typical break situation that we do seems like a good place to start. Most people seem happy with that. So
Yeah.
it's less the rule, more of I guess it is. That's kind of the rule, but it can be broken.
Yeah, and the rule changes geographically. Like you said, Nashville does not operate like the Midwest does. New York does not operate like Nashville, and LA doesn't operate like any of them.
Yeah, in LA, you'd be more likely to just do an hour. You
Yeah.
would do like your hour special,
Just
get
a
off
power.
for 15 minutes, and then the next guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, just it really depends. But typically we do the 15s.
So set lists.
Mm-hmm.
How about covers versus originals? This is always that, again, LA to New York to
Oh yeah,
Nashville.
geographically it's much different. Out here, if you're getting paid money, you're probably a cover band. Let's be honest. I know that might ruffle some feathers in certain circles, but unfortunately, there's not a huge outlet for original music in this particular.
And that's what it comes down to.
That's kind of what it comes down to. And I love playing original music. I love getting out there and doing that. But it's really hard to be able to keep the lights on if you are a career musician with only gigging in the original music circuit, especially around here. There is avenues for it, certainly, but they aren't very high-paying, lucrative avenues. So as far as setlets goes, if you are a band that's going out to play for 3 hours and you also do have original music, you may sprinkle one original song per set. So you would play maybe 3 of your original songs total throughout the entire night. That would be a very typical thing to do.
See if anybody, like you've said too, Devin, if nobody reacts, well, then it probably sounded like someone else's song, and it sounds awesome. You guys have said that before. No reaction is the best reaction. To a degree. Yeah, then a bit. Yeah. So how about you? Same thing, Devin?
I mean, the only time I've ever done originals were at a handful of open mic nights where that kind of thing is expected. You don't go to an open mic night and play a cover of a song. It's just not what it's about. People sing poetry people read poetry that they wrote. They do all kinds of things. So it's expected that's an original scene. So I've done originals there, and I've played originals for artists as a sideman, which ironically is sometimes the only way to make money in the original circuit is not to be the artist, but to be the band that they hire. Unfortunately,
Yeah, that's true.
because
Being the sideman.
they might pay their sidemen. So for most of the situations I've done, it's normally 100% covers. That being said, the thing I try and push for is being allowed to play the covers that I want to play. So I get to choose the songs
Okay.
because I like music. I like playing
There's a
guitar
little bit
and a lot
of
of
a win
songs.
back there.
So
Right.
I just like having the opportunity to play songs that I enjoy. And if I can get away with that, I'm already pretty happy. And then the other thing is I'm going to improvise on them, even if there wasn't before. So they're letting me put more guitar solos in there, improvising it, letting the band stretch songs. So we're not a karaoke band. I've never played in karaoke bands. That's not the point. So I don't mind playing covers if they're not expecting backing tracks to sound like the record. I'm like, we're putting our spin on it. I'm going to solo over it. We might change it up a little bit, and we're going to play the songs that we want to play. And if we all agree on those rules, I'll play to the rules of the scene, which is, cover band is kind of king in this area.
So what are the layers, Dave? Like the tiers, You're in your late teens, very early 20s. You're in an original band. What are the options? I mean, is it the atypical stuff downtown?
House shows.
Yeah, a lot of house
Oh,
shows.
really?
Actually, that's the DIY thing starting to reign supreme nowadays. But when I was, 16 to 18 and I was playing in an original band around this area, there was a few companies that existed that gave original bands an opportunity to play, such as Innovation Concerts and the Verso Group. And they ran venues on the east side, such as Frankie's Main Street, Headliners. At one point, they owned the Ottawa Tavern. These sort of venues gave an original band the opportunity to get out there and play their first gig. And there's a bit of a pay-to-play with some of these groups where it was like you had to schlep your own tickets, and if you didn't sell a threshold of tickets, you didn't get paid simply because you get paid off of your ticket sales. So even though you're not buying your own tickets as you would out in like LA, you are entirely dependent on ticket sales to make money. And you would play for maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Now, as you well, I'm not going to say graduate. One's not better or worse than the other, but as you move out of that particular scene and you move into a different scene, such as the cover circuit, it's no longer expected that you bring your own crowd. It is now expected that this bar is thriving on their own to bring their own crowd to it. So now you're playing 3-hour cover sets from 9 to midnight, 10 to 1, whatever it is, or 10 to 2 if you're unlucky. Those ones hurt. And you now have a built-in crowd, but you're expected to have a curated, very well and tight 3-hour set list of very popular music. So the way that those two different scenes function is entirely different. And I know people that are of all different age groups in both scenes. You know, I know of 16-year-olds in the cover scene, and I know of 40-year-olds in the original scene. You know, it's not an age gradation. It's more of a passion gradation. Do you want to play more covers, more originals, a blend of both? How do you personally want to relate with that?
Yeah, and the size of the revenue stream.
And I think that expectation from the venue is one of the most important parts about that first question of how many covers you do, is because you're not going to a venue where people came to hear you, which would be the reason for doing originals, because they came for you. You know, we're going to venues where they have a built-in crowd who's expecting to have a good time tonight. That's it. So that's why the cover thing ends up making more sense, is because we don't have to schlep tickets or do anything like that. We don't have to do any background work before the gig other than getting the date knocked down, getting the musicians picked, picking out your music. Those are easy things to do, though. So if I don't have to do any other background work, that makes it easier for someone like me to sit there and line up 3 of those in a row. Because once they're on the calendar, until the day arrives, there's no more work to do. If every single gig meant you had to schlep tickets, do promotion, do all that stuff, it's like, you might as well be doing an original project then if you're going to do all of that legwork just to get people to show up.
Right. Yeah, and I would have to agree that, you know, as you were saying, pushing the most for, or building the expectation around building your cover set. You know, I've never been off-put by cover bands that played an amazing rendition, you know, of a cover. You know,
Oh, of course
the
not.
wow factor of, no way, you know, I've never heard anyone cover this.
I mean, I joked around a couple weeks ago with you guys that I'd go and seen a favorite guitar player of mine, Eric Johnson. We'll just throw the name out there.
Sure.
He deserves to be called.
Sure. There you go,
And
Eric.
I was like, my favorite part of the night was when he finally stopped playing all the songs from his famous album, The Thing He Has to Do, because we came to his concert. And he played for an hour for encore, and he just took requests from the people in the front row. He'd go, "What do you want to hear now?" And they go, "Hendrix."
Yeah.
And, okay. And then that was the best part of the night, was watching him just play all these songs, and you can tell he loves all of it. Like he grew up and was around all this stuff when it was happening.
Right.
And he's happy to play his friends' music.
Yeah, and I like when it's recognizable,
Yeah.
but not tribute-like. You know,
Yeah.
Yes.
you're not trying to mirror it. You know,
That's
that's a fine line.
I think
tribute bands
unless
are
you're
scary.
just amazing, you should never try to mirror it. You know, you
Tribute
should
bands
always
scare me
own the cover. Yeah,
Because it's just like animation or anything like that, where they talk about that uncanny valley. You know, there's a point where you sound recognizable to the song, but you're doing your own thing on it, or you're just not that good, so you can't quite mimic it. And for whatever reason, that gets a free pass. And the closer you inch to the real song, all of a sudden it just starts sounding wrong.
right.
Like if you're not nailing it, it can sound wrong. You're like,
the more
oh,
you're gonna be
that's not what his
judged.
voice sounds like. That's
No.
not how that guitar solo goes. So I think it's actually better normally to separate yourself somewhat
Yeah.
and have a voice. Like I know for me, guitar and vocally, I've stopped trying to mimic people as hard. I decided I think it'll be actually better for the band if I have a voice and I have guitar sounds that I go to. So everything we do the whole night sounds like our rendition. Even if I'm playing the same things, I stop trying to nail each tone of each song
Yeah.
because I think it actually did us a disfavor, because
Sure.
the closer I try to inch towards it, the more blaring it was that
The
we,
further away
we don't
you're
sound
from
like
it.
it.
Yeah, the further away you're from it. And I think taking ownership of a cover is almost like a way to make it an original, right? So now you're kind of dabbling in both worlds, and you're getting to showcase yourself and your talents with a familiar,
Yeah.
a familiar space and place, right?
And I've seen bands play their own songs from 20, 30 years ago. The same guys, same everything, and I don't even like them doing a cover of their own song because they can't even do it right. They even sound off. So
Isn't that-
I'm like,
I know.
if they can't do it, why am I gonna do it?
I know. Isn't that hilarious? That was
I
a
was like,
great
just-
insight.
Yeah.
Right. Oh man. Well, I think we have covered an awful lot today. That was awesome. We,
Oh
we
man, we're
learned
gonna
about.
go off on the note with me dissing.
Oh well, I don't know if we can think of anything else real quick. What could be? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. Best meal you ever had at a gig.
Ooh,
Dave.
that's tricky. Oh man, put me on the
Top
spot.
2 then at least.
Ah, man, I played some country clubs that had some pretty fine dining. I'm
Mine's
gonna be
a country
honest.
club too.
Wow.
Let's see. Yeah, that was awesome. Let's see. I'm trying to think of maybe a greasy spoon
Right.
sort of feel.
Like a surprise,
There's a few places in Detroit that had some pretty gosh darn good food too.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I've had a lot of meals on gigs. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
sure.
I bet you have. Devin, how about you?
I'll give you 2 just to make up for you, Dave.
Okay.
So my
you.
literal best meal ever was we played at this country club for their annual clam bake-off.
Ooh.
And we literally had a whole basket of clams for the table, and then we'd walk in, and they were fresh lobsters. They were boiling, and with we're all like, I think we get fed the same thing they do we? And we walked up to the table, and he just goes, 1 or 2 lobsters, and I was like, 2 is an option.
Yes.
Second best meal, ironically, was one I did in high school, and I loved this gig. We played at this little soul food place, and I'll never forget, we had a trio where the drummer just had just a snare because we were literally in the doorway of this place. And we were just in a tiny corner with 3 people in a space that was like 3 by 4 feet.
Yeah.
We were all bunched up together,
Sure.
just playing music as people come in the door. It was a hilarious gig I did for my high school because they probably donated money to us or something.
Right.
And then they sent the jazz band.
Yeah.
And then they asked us if we wanted to eat afterwards. And of course, I got fried catfish and fries and stuff like that. And oh God, just
Oh,
gorged
man.
myself on it because we weren't making any money. We were doing
Sure.
it for doing it for the school.
No,
So
it's-
I was all about the food.
Yeah, there's those, they stick out. Those memories stick
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We are going to wrap it up for today. We covered a lot. I got some understanding on the setup, equipment, do's and don'ts, how-tos, timelines. Always going, we're always covering the covers and the originals theme. So, okay, guys. Well, that's going to be it for this cast. Appreciate everybody participating, all the knowledge that you dropped.
All right.
And again, Dave Sorelli, Devin Kruger, we're out. This has been Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.